Hello and welcome to the Hoop Collective podcast. We talk about the NBA, which we are doing on Sunday evening. Joining us from New York City is Tim Bontemps.
Hello, everybody.
And joining us from Austin, Texas, which is an NBA city this week, because the San Antonio Spurs played 2 games in Austin, which I think they're going to be doing going forward on a regular basis, is our Spurs reporter, Andrew Lopez. What's up, Andrew?
It is, you don't have to say evening. You can go ahead and say night. We are definitely recording this on a Sunday night.
Yeah. Yeah. So the game that the Spurs played on Sunday was against the Nets. The game went overtime, which Spurs prevailed. And so this is a 2-year-old arena in Austin, where on the campus of UT Austin, right?
Yeah. And I think they set like the indoor or the attendance record the other night. They had like 16,000 in here. It is a very, very nice arena. I will not say that it is better than certain NBA arenas that I have been in my past, but I will say that it is a very, very nice arena.
Well, the Spurs just built $100 million practice facility in San Antonio. They are trying to get a new arena. There's some things being bandied around. I'm starting to get really old, Andrew. I've got gray hairs coming in, but I remember when the arena they play in now was brand new. And it's kind of weird that arenas that I watched open are like trying to get close, because I'm like, I'm not that old, but I guess I've been around a while. But I don't think the Spurs are going anywhere. But it's interesting, they have investment in their ownership group from Austin now, and so now they've got some Austin games every year, and they got a Nuggets game. The champs came to Austin a couple days ago. And look, this is really Wembanyama had another terrific game on Sunday. What was his final numbers against the Nets?
33 points, 15 rebounds, 7 assists, 7 blocks. Only the 4th player to hit those marks or hit 30, 15, 7, 7 in a game. It feels like, really since his February has started, there's more games than not where it's hasn't done this since so-and-so, or only Kareem and somebody else did this. And tonight was just another example of that. He is playing ridiculous basketball.
Yeah. So look, we could spend an hour just talking about Victor's doing. We have spent a lot of time talking about Victor. Since we have you here, I think it's important right now to talk about where the Spurs go from here. Because the thing about the Spurs is they are sort of viewed as sort of the repository of all the wisdom in the NBA. Like for 15 or 17 years now, these teams are constantly hiring away their executives, hiring away their assistant coaches to try to replicate what they have. They go back to the Oracle, R.C. Buford, their team president, whenever they get into a prickly position. He's sort of the arbiter of wisdom and intelligence, and all that's fair and true. But the Spurs are in a position they've never been in before. And that position is to how to build this team around Victor. And I think it's going to be hard. As hard as it is to build anything, obviously it's hard to build any team from nothing. I mean, you don't get the number 1 pick by being good. And they're obviously still terrible. And they didn't think they were going to be this bad. And so...
Yeah, if they were anybody but the Spurs, frankly, they would be getting a lot more stick for being horrendous with this guy on their team. I mean, they're a under 25% winning percentage for the year, even after today's win. Or 15 and 53?
Yeah, today put them at 15 and 53.
They got a 22%.
They thought they were going to be.
Yeah, I mean, and like Victor's been everything he could have been advertised as we've talked about a lot, and they still suck. Like, if it was like, imagine if you just switch places with them in Detroit. Detroit would be getting annihilated. But the Spurs have basically gotten a total free pass on this.
Yeah. And so, look, I mean, here's the reality. The reality is that when you're in San Antonio, you're going to probably have to build through the draft. They can build through trade, obviously. But in all honesty, if you look at the history of the Spurs, they've done very, very few trades. And I don't know what they've got to trade. They have future.
A lot of picks.
Well, they have a lot to
picks.
trade. Wait, what is this?
Well,
that's the
they've
thing.
got future picks to trade, but like for example,
they have some very valuable future Atlanta Hawks picks to trade. They have all of their own picks to trade. They have a bunch of interesting young players to trade.
Yes, but when you look at right now, if you were to bring all the general managers into a room and say, what's the best way to do a rebuild? They would say Oklahoma City. And that is essentially kind of the model that the Spurs haven't announced this, but the Spurs aren't going to rebuild through free agency. They're not going to, be able to count on, getting a player in this draft where they're going to very likely have a top 4 pick. There's not going to be a player in this draft, at least as we look at it right now, that like, oh my gosh, they're going to draft a number 2. Maybe they do get lucky that way, but you can't say that. The way that the Thunder have rebuilt is kind of the path that the Spurs are going down. And the trade that they made, really what I think with Derek White was the first move, but then especially with the DeJounte Murray trade, that's where they fully embraced going into this route. But the thing was, the trade, the basis of Oklahoma City's rebuild was trading Paul George. And that's how they got their franchise superstar. Now, it does look like the Spurs have their franchise superstar, but I'm not sure that there is a asset on this team that is going to be able to get necessarily a ready-made number 2. Now, you may debate me on that because of their picks, but I don't know how valuable their picks are going to be, and they have not shown a willingness to really trade their picks. So I think it's going to be challenging, Lopez. I wonder what you've picked up talking to Popovich and team officials throughout the year about what they want, what they're hoping to do.
Well, Greg Popovich is so open to talking about the rebuild process and everything that he will do with this team. But he did mention a couple of weeks ago, or maybe I think it might have been the first Austin press conference that he had, where he mentioned, look, we're going to explore all options. Everything is on the table. He goes, but every team is doing that. But I do think that they have, since they have so many, they still have a DeMar DeRozan first round pick potentially coming their way. I think they have other assets that are going to be valuable. And I think if you decide to put 3 first round picks on the table, I don't think it matters necessarily who that other player is. Like, you're not trading out a Paul George. At that point, you're just trading.
But they've never done a trade like that. They've never ever done a trade like that.
So it's just, they've also never, when they had David Robinson, when they drafted him, they had 2 years to figure things out when he was doing his Navy commitment. So in the time that he got there, they were a 50-win team. And when they drafted Tim Duncan, the only reason they were bad the year before is because David Robinson was dealing with back issues, and you basically just ran that back.
Popovich fired the coach, installed himself, and they tanked.
And it paid off because you were able to put a healthy Tim Duncan and a healthy David Robinson and Tim Duncan together. This is different. This is not those situations. You appear to have your superstar, so now they may have to do some things that they are not used to doing or have not done, because I don't know how much you can continue to tank or, be on that side of things as Victor continues to play as well as he does. The kid's putting up 20, 10, 3 and 3, and really 3.5 in 29 minutes a game this year. When he starts to play 32, 33, 34, those numbers are going to go up. His efficiency has gone up throughout the year. You're going to have to rethink, I think, how you have done things in the past because of where he is. It's just because he is going to eventually be so good that you're going to.
Because here's what I want to
think.
Exactly. Well, here's what I want to point out. I'm sorry, Bontemps, 1 second.
You're good.
Next year's draft, the 2025 draft, and I can't see 15 months into the future, but next year's draft, the 2025 draft, is believed to potentially have multiple potential franchise players in it. Now, I'm not going to sit here and quote chapter and verse. I'll bring Jonathan Givony on to do that.
Let him do that.
But it is regarded as a potentially much deeper draft.
Yeah, the next two drafts, the next 2 drafts between Cooper Flagg and Cameron Boozer's in the next year's draft. And there's several guys in both drafts that are very interesting high-level guys that are probably considered high-level guys in this year's draft.
Right. And so the Spurs have their pick, obviously, for 2025. They have the Atlanta Hawks pick for 2025. I would assume that the Hawks, regardless of what they do next year or this next summer, I I think that they're going to attempt to be a playoff team. I don't think they're going to be necessarily in a rebuild mode. I don't think you can count on that pick being super duper high, but I believe it's unprotected.
It is.
They have the Toronto Raptors draft pick, which I believe is top 6 protected.
Well, they have the Raptors
top
pick that's
six
top 6
protected,
protected
yeah.
this year.
Yeah, and if it
And then
doesn't convert this year,
if they don't
it's
get
top
it
6
this
next year.
which
Yeah.
is it's right on the edge.
Right.
But they potentially could have 3 picks in next year's draft, including their own. And so
And a Bulls pick that is top 10 protected next year.
Okay. So they potentially could have 4 picks in next year's draft. Maybe they won't, maybe they'll have 2. But if you brought in a management specialist and they evaluated this whole thing and they see the way teams are built and they see that the Spurs are nowhere close to being serious contenders and it's hard to predict, you can't count on free agency. You're not 100% sure whether a star would want to come there. You would say, take your time, wait, like they did with David Robinson, and try to get a really high pick again in 2025. Because frankly, that is what the Thunder did. They got Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and they were terrible for several years in a row. And only after they'd sort of been down for several years did they start the upswing. That's the model. The model doesn't include trying to improve dramatically. And so now you're asking the Spurs to do something that they're not usually doing, and you're potentially, because of the nature of the player Victor is, asking them to do something that might be against the wisdom that they prefer. And that's where I think it's going to be a challenge for them.
Yeah, and he's just that, I think, kind of transcendent as a player that to me, it's no question that you attempt to try to do that. Like you look at it, it is going to be hard. You mentioned, I mean, we talked about just how stacked that 25 class is. But maybe it's one of the other picks. Maybe it's the Atlanta pick for some reason. Maybe something goes wrong there. Maybe it's, you're where the Toronto pick is. Maybe you can make some splashes in different ways. But I think it's going to be harder to look at this team next year and project another, 20 to 25 win season. And I don't know what they're going to do this summer yet. Like I said, there's trade options on the table. There's free agency options. How they have typically operated is one thing, but I just think that because of Victor, it may change or accelerate how they typically would operate.
I think this entire conversation is being had backwards. This isn't about what the Spurs can or should do or what they're going to do or how they're going to do it. We're talking about a guy, Victor Wembanyama, who has shown since he was 15 or 16 years old that he has been very willing to do things in an unconventional manner and to do things to get where he wants to go in the manner he wants to go there. We can go back to what he did with his final couple of years in France, where he's playing for Tony Parker's team, ASVEL, one of the biggest teams in the country. Didn't like how things were going there for a variety of reasons. And they basically decamped to a smaller team and just make it the Victor show. And it's just all about Victor for the whole season. As Brian knows, the team that he was on, Metropolitans 92, basically folded after the season. It was more or less there to just be.
I mean, they're still around, but like literally everybody left.
They couldn't play in the EuroLeague after qualifying for it. That's how much they dropped off. It was a team that was created essentially to be a vehicle for Victor to have a smooth glide path into the draft process and have it be the best situation for him possible, right? You can't obviously manufacture that in the NBA. If you get drafted to a team, you are then on the team. You have to deal with the market dynamics that come with being in the NBA. That is now where Victor sits with the Spurs. And as you know, Andrew, you're around him every day. I've been around him a very little bit, far less than Brian, much less than you. He is a guy who very clearly on the court, in locker rooms, in the press conferences, makes it very clear that he wants to be competitive right now and winning right now. He is not a guy that, to me, seems like he's going to be along with the plan to be bad for a while. And if you talk about Oklahoma City, when you look at any good organization, right? Look at Golden State, for example. For a long time, they had Bob Myers, they had Steve Kerr, they had Steph Curry. They had the three of them completely aligned, right? In what the team was going to do and how they were going to do it. They go get Kevin Durant, everybody's on board. They decide how they're going to handle Draymond Green with his various things that go on. They've got everybody on board, right? You have to have that kind of alignment if you're going to move things along. You go look at the Thunder. Thunder have Mark Daigneault, who obviously came up in their system, was their G League coach, handpicked by Sam Presti to run the team. Sam Presti has run the team very successfully for a long time. And throughout the entire time that they've had Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, there has not been one word from him at any point saying, we got to get better sooner. We got to be more competitive. We got to do this a different way, right? All he ever said, he was the perfect company man. And I'm sure privately he wanted to win games faster, but there was never a peep from him about, we got to be more competitive. I want to win games. I want to do this. I want to do that. It was just, we're doing the right stuff. We're going to get to the right place. And Victor already in his first season is like talked openly about being frustrated with losing and not wanting to lose and wanting to be on a more competitive team. So that I think is the real challenge to me. It's not like, yes, the Spurs have work to do, but if they just rush out and do some dumb stuff to try to win 38 games next year, that's not going to do anything for them. All it's going to do is further inflame the situation, because this guy's going to sit there in a couple of years and go, well, this team is an 8 seed or a 9 seed or a 10 seed. And I don't want to be on a team that's an 8 seed or a 9 seed or a 10 seed.
So Lopez, you were there during this. Bontemps, you might have been too. This was during All-Star weekend. And Victor had his media availability. And the one thing about Victor that I noticed when I first got to know him last year, and that Bontemps was really, you called this out, was Victor's ability to kind of make a brash, sometimes even bombastic statement and do it in a way that is with sort of monotone and low key, and maybe the accent has something to do with it, where he doesn't sound like he's making a proclamation, but when you
he
go,
just says his brags with a smile, so they don't come off in quite the same way.
Right. And you said that like one of the first times you saw him get interviewed, Bontemps, and it's only been further and further backed up as the times go along. And so this is a quote that multiple NBA executives have highlighted and talked to me about, because I think this is an important quote. This was at All-Star Weekend. Quote, I am not skipping steps. I've been told never to skip steps my whole life, but it didn't stop me from running up the stairs. Honestly, that is two.
Well, you can just go up the stairs with one step. So
exactly.
We didn't really have.
Well, that's what it did. Seriously, in all honesty, I wrote thousands of words about Victor's upbringing and development to becoming the number one pick last year. I probably could have just played that clip and gone out to dinner in Paris instead of doing all those interviews, because very succinctly, that is exactly accurate about what happened to him, because obviously his size and his talent, he was told he had to wait on the bench and he had to wait his turn because at 16, you shouldn't be playing with the senior team for Nanterre. And when he came to the team that you mentioned, Asvel, the team owned by Tony Parker, was competing in the EuroLeague. Of course, you can't put a 17-year-old out there in EuroLeague games. It's insane. Look at this frail kid. He has no chance. And, he was told, don't skip the steps, work the process. But every time there's been something put in front of him, he smashed it out of the park. And that's the thing, Lopez. That quote right there, in a lot of ways, encapsulates the Victor Wembanyama expectation and experience. It is it's subtle, and it seems like he's not like taking aim at anything, but it was very powerful. I was talking to a guy who's been on the league for 25 years, and he goes, Go find me a quote where LeBron said something like that as a rookie. Now, I don't recall.
You would know.
I mean, LeBron was frustrated as a rookie that the Cavs were pretty bad for a long time. They were not this bad, by the way. They were hunting. I mean, it was one of those years where the Eastern Conference had like a team like 7 or 8 games under 500 make the playoffs. But the Cavs were hunting the playoffs in this time of year. They were not eliminated like the Spurs. The Spurs, I think, have actually been mathematically eliminated.
They are officially eliminated. Yes, they were the first team to be officially eliminated.
So, when you hear him say stuff like that, what do you think how do you think the Spurs should react to that?
The skipping steps part has been something that Pop has said over and over and over and over this year about Vic's progression and the team's progression and things like that.
I know, and Victor's saying, I've been hearing it my whole life, Pop.
And then the fact that he said it right then, and I think it was what he said right after that was he's like, when I was 12, I wanted to make the national team to go to the Olympics. When he was like, that's the idea, like in his head, like I'm 12 years old and I can play in the Olympics. He
obviously couldn't have made it at 12, but he might have been able to make it when he was 16 or 17.
And so like that is, but it speaks to everything that he thinks about himself. And he had a comment in French the other day when we got to Austin, to one of the French reporters. And, that was I asked him about defensive player of the year, and he says, well, I think it's Rudy's this year, but, and he jokes, he laughs, he laughs when he said it, but he goes, but that's, my time's coming. His time is over soon. And it's
he's saying about his mentor, his countryman.
Right. Yeah. The guy who was one of the guys who probably taught him more in terms of what to do. And he laughs when he says it, but you just know there's just a bit of truth there.
Well, it's like what he said about Scoot Henderson. He was like, if he was born in a different year, he might be the number 1 pick, but he wasn't.
Yeah. Right. It's how he handles everything. And he obviously has put in meticulous work across the years. And because of that, all the work and time he's invested, the reason all of it comes off in the way it does is because he doesn't think he's bragging. It's because it's all of the stuff that he has done and the work he's done makes him think this is the correct thing for me to say. For example, we talked about this on the pod before. Lopez was with me when I asked Victor about being the next face of the league potentially, which I asked Anthony Edwards. I asked all sorts of guys. And every guy, including the Ant-Man, who's not exactly a shy guy, everybody was like, I don't really think about that. Victor said, when I asked him, do you think about being the next face of the NBA? Of course. And it's something I've been working on for years because being labeled as one of the faces of the league is not primarily basketball, but also your image in front of everyone. So in other words, it's not just because I want to be the best player on the planet, but I want to be the most marketable guy and the guy in every way, like LeBron, which again, he's a 19-year-old kid. But this to me gets back to what we were talking about before, where the Spurs are going to have to find a way to keep this guy on the program with them. Doesn't mean he's going to walk in there in June and say, hey, I had a year in San Antonio. This isn't really for me. I want to get traded. I don't mean that, but he's not a guy that is going to be cool with just chilling and taking directions on how things are going to go. Like, you're going to have to sell him on, hey, listen, this is the plan we're going to take, or the path we're going to take, and here's why we're going to take it. And you have to get him to buy in. Because again, you look at any of the elite teams, you have star player, coach, lead executive, and often owner. Those 4 people, if they're aligned, your organization's in good shape. If one or more of them are in different places, or they're not on the same page, you got a lot of problems. And I want to make something. This has to sit.
Yeah, I want to make something clear here, because Ramona Shelburne talked about this on the NBA Today last week, and she got some pretty strong pushback because the assumption was, ESPN's talking about how Victor doesn't want to be in San Antonio. That's not what we're talking about at all here. What we're talking about is how the all-knowing, almighty, process-driven, we know what we're doing Spurs, because quite frankly, that's the way Greg Popovich sits up there a lot of times. Okay?
Not a lot of times, all the time.
We know better than you. And their track record absolutely gives him the right to do that. And we're just saying it may not go that way. The Spurs might be in territory they've never been in before. And
it might go that way too, but it's a pivotal time for them, because when you have pressure on you in a situation like this, and Lopez, you're around it every day, so I'm curious what your thoughts are in terms of this. When you have pressure on you to make decisions to try to improve the team, and this is obviously there's all this momentum now, right? Like, look how great, like you said before, early in the year, Victor had a lot of duds since he's moved to center. Shockingly, when they started playing a point guard with him, imagine that helped. He's obviously now putting up astronomical stat lines almost every game. So when you have pressure on you to make decisions to get better in a shorter time frame than you want to, there's certainly paths where you can do that. But when you have pressure on your decision-making process, that is potentially when you make mistakes and you panic and you rush into something you shouldn't. And that, to me, is what they have to guard against.
Let me talk about the Cleveland Cavs with LeBron. Okay?
Yep.
Paul Silas was the head coach. May he rest in peace. Now, this was in 2003. It was a very 2003, 2004. It was a very different time from a media perspective. Not every press conference was captured and broadcast and available to the world. There was no social media. Okay. So, but Paul would say this on the record to the media on numerous occasions. This is a guy who had been in the NBA 40 years at this point and had won titles with multiple franchises. Okay. One of his people he learned under was Red Auerbach.
He only played with Bill Russell, Paul Silas.
Right. Okay. Both from Oakland. He would say, again, on the record, and he would explain with great care, not in a soundbite. He's like, look, we don't have a chance with LeBron until the way he would say it is another big timer. That was the way he goes, LeBron needs another big timer. We have no chance here until we get another big timer. We got to be working every single day to get another big timer.
And guess when they got another big timer? When he came back the second time to play with Kyrie.
Well, that's the thing, is that 2 years in, the Cavs did kind of panic a little bit. The general manager had been fired. There was a new owner, which, not necessarily the same in San Antonio. And they rolled all their dice on Larry Hughes. And
after the Carlos Boozer disaster, by the way.
Right. But I'm not even sure Boozer, one of the reasons Boozer left, he left for money, but one of the reasons that Boozer left, not the need to relitigate this, is that Silas didn't see him as that.
No, but I just mean they had a really promising young player who ended up making all-star teams walk out the door for nothing.
But Silas wasn't talking about Boozer.
No, I know.
Right. Silas was talking about Dwayne Wade. Silas was talking about Kyrie Irving. Silas was talking about Anthony Davis. That's what he was talking about. And he wasn't like expecting the Cavs to deliver that player in 15 minutes. But he was like, look, this guy is the greatest young player I've ever seen. And the only chance we have here is if we get him another superstar player.
The history of the NBA is you got to have at least two guys.
Right. Now, if you can imagine, happy birthday, Bontemps. You can imagine.
I forgot about the peace sign thing on the Zooms here. Victor will be having balloons come up when he gets a second star.
Oh man.
Anyway, so if Greg Popovich was coming out and sitting in front of the media, in front of the everybody, and saying, we got to get another big timer, like, it would be received like, oh my God, he doesn't believe in the front office. He's, calling them out, blah, blah, blah. Like, I understand he can't say that, but the truth is still the truth. It was true in 2003. It's true in 2024. And so, and the Cavs botched it. They botched it in the end of the day.
And I will say this about Vic. Publicly, he has said all the right things every single time. This is a guy who talked about in the pre-draft process about he wants not. I mean, we talk about him wanting to win Defensive Player of the Year. He wants to win Rookie of the Year. He wants to win all these accolades and do all this. He also wants to win the press conference. He understands the message that he is putting forth every night, and he has said, "Yes, I know we can't skip steps," and he goes back to that all the time, going back to the running up the stairs. But I think is just. I just think he's going to be too good for them to have that is going to, I think, push this more than anything else. And you've seen the efficiency numbers now. You've seen all the things grow up. And it's going to come down to what are the other guys on this team going to be able to do next to him? And how many of them are going to last?
Well, yeah, I know you.
I was going to say he's playing really well right now, and we haven't really seen the wins now. So he's going to need some help.
Yeah, I'm not sure how many of these guys are future. I mean, look, Lopez, I know you're in the locker room every day. I'm not asking you to. I don't know. I'm going to say I don't know how many of these guys are Victor Wembanyama teammates in 2 years. There's a few. I think Devin Vassell has proven to be an excellent player. He's number 3 at best.
I mean, I think Devin Vassell is the one guy you could say right now, with the extension that the Spurs gave him, they have truly committed to him as a guy that you would expect. I mean, obviously he could be in a deal, but I would think given that extension and the fact that he is a very good fit with Victor based off his player type, he's the one guy I think you can look at and say, this guy in a couple of years should be one of their core guys with him. But the question is, to your point, well, we talk all the time about Denver's lineup, right? And how they have these 5 guys that over time they slowly put together to fit perfectly with Nikola Jokic. For as good as Nikola Jokic is, they've got this team that fits perfectly around him. And Victor, while a phenomenal player, is certainly a unique player, and you're going to have certain kinds of guys around him to make that work. And they're going to have to figure out the right way to do that. And, is Jeremy Sohan one of those guys? Maybe. Is Keldon Johnson one of those guys? Maybe. They got a lot of maybe to probably not guys on their team, I would say.
And the thing about Keldon, I think, and Jeremy, if they are going to end up making a trade, if that's the route they're going to go, they have solid numbers that you would have to end up moving. This is obviously at some point you're going to have to use one of these guys to do something just because of the numbers, and the math tells you that. Now I'm not saying it's because they don't like Kel, they don't like it's the math has to work for some of these guys, and I think
you got to send out salary to get salary back.
That's the way the NBA works, but I think you've seen it a little bit more as Pop. Another thing that Pop says all the time is these guys are still learning how to play with Vic. And I think some of what we see, and it's early in the year, Vic would have games where he would have more duds because he would have bad shooting nights, and but they were just go do whatever you want. Pop said at the beginning of the year, where I just want to see him for the first 20 games, and then we'll see what happens. Now that happened to coincide when they moved Jeremy and did all this other stuff, but he got to do some things maybe that he wouldn't have necessarily been able to do if they were, in the thick of a play-in race or a playoff race. So some of that has kind of been, I don't want to say by design, but it has worked, I think, to his benefit. I've seen the growing, the growth between him and Devin. And, to your point, that the extension they signed him to makes it's another great number if you want to look at it.
That was the one who hit them for that game-winning lob in the game Sunday night, right?
And so, and that was a play where they had worked up to that play all night. Where it's and this was not against any. This was against Mikal Bridges and Nick Claxton. This wasn't, we caught Cam Thomas in a switch, or we caught Schroeder in a bad spot. This was, we have our 2 guys who we want on their 2 best guys going at it in this situation. Now they were doing some other things. They threw Finney Smith at him, but it was mostly a Claxton Finney Smith night, and it was the one time that because Devin had been hitting some shots, even though he was 1 for 7 from 3, he had been hitting his midi all night. And when Devin came off the screen, Claxton had to step up just a bit, and then it allowed the lob to Victor. One of the things that was kind of big thing on Spurs Twitter and Spurs fans are they can't get him the ball, they can't throw him the lobs. The lobs aren't there. If it's they've probably had more turnovers throwing him lobs. I feel like it's 3 to 4 a game now where it's just misplaced passes. It all feels like that. I mean, learning to play with a 7'4" guy is going to take a lot. And I think they're going through a lot of mistakes right now because it's let's try to see what we can do and then see which of these pieces is going to move forward. Also, Trey Jones, I think, is one of the pieces that stays just because I don't think Trey Jones ever leaves San Antonio. Like, he just feels like he's a Spurs lifer who's going to be here 13 years and then be in the front office. And you're like, oh, well, yeah, of course that happened.
When LeBron was a rookie, and again, I know that the Cavs and the Spurs are quite different organizations.
Yeah.
But this is the last time we saw a player like this, at this age. When LeBron was a rookie, he had 20 teammates during his rookie year. 20 different teammates. I'm talking about 10-day guys or whatever. By year 3, one was left. One.
And by the way, they did it poorly.
They did do it poorly, but I'm just illustrating the point.
Right.
But by the way, by year 4, they were in the finals. They didn't build a sustainable team. But
they were also in the finals in a horrifically weak Eastern Conference.
Absolutely. No question.
Right.
But I'm just saying year 1, they started 4-15. Year 4, they were in the finals. Okay. Those are true statements. From year 1 to 3, one player was still there. I'm just telling you, it'll be a bit of a process here. The other thing I'll say before we move on, go ahead, Bontemps.
I just wanted to ask Lopez, because we sort of talked around it. What do you think? Like, we've talked a lot about the point guard thing on the pod. I know you've only been on a couple of times, but obviously the Trey Jones move into the starting lineup has led to Victor playing a lot better. What do you think? Forget specific players. As you look at next season, and you could say they need these couple archetypes of players or these kinds of players, what do they need to add to become a team that could compete for the play-in next year?
I think they need another guy who could just shoot in that group. And right now that Julian Champagnie has kind of played that role where, look, Pop is doing what he does, where he takes a guy who is normally a starter and puts him on the bench. And they've tried different variations of this at different times this year. But Keldon Johnson's that guy right now. Keldon Johnson is going to finish games. He is the Manu. He is that sixth man right now, where he's still going to get his 16, 18, 20 points a game, but he's just going to do it off the bench now. When they finished the game on Sunday night against the Nets, it was Keldon in for Julian Champagnie for most of that. I think you need another guy who is a shooter on this team. I think the only guy who was shooting above 40 for the team this year was Doug McDermott. He's out the door now. And you looked at
on threes, above 40 on threes.
Oh, 40 on threes. Yes, I'm sorry. And they did a lot of tying Doug McDermott to Victor. That's, I think, where you have to go. And Trey Jones, for all he is as a point guard, is not a very good shooter. Has shot better as of late, but I think you have to get somebody who can shoot a little bit better in that spot and keep this floor spaced out for Mr. Wembanyama.
One teammate after 2 years. That's all I'm going to say. There was one. By the way, before we move on, as good as that play was that's iced this game in overtime for the Spurs on Sunday night, it was nobody was beating the game winner that Kyrie threw in up the road in Dallas, which was
what an asinine shot. And I say that in the highest levels of respect.
What was it? Would you say a 20-foot left-handed hook shot?
It was a 20-foot sky hook.
Yeah, 20-foot sky hook. With his left hand. Although
with his left hand,
it doesn't.
The other Texan on the pod wrote a game story about this today, and said it was the second longest hook shot made of the season. The only one longer was also made by Kyrie, who flung in some, like, I don't remember, 30-something foot hook shot on like some sort of end of clock situation against Portland earlier this year, which does speak to Kyrie's amazing abilities with the ball, which, by the way, we've spent years talking about all of Kyrie, everything that comes with Kyrie Irving. And my thoughts on whether you can win with Kyrie or not are very much on the record. You want to know why people keep getting sucked into Kyrie Irving?
Yeah.
Plays like this.
Well, I'll just say
things few other people could do with the ball.
I've said this before, and I'll just say it again. When I covered Kyrie on a day-to-day basis when he was with the Cavs, I would watch him practice, especially at the end of practice, and I would watch him in games. And I said to him one time, Kyrie, I watch you practice. I don't ever see you practice some of this stuff that you do, specifically with shooting the ball, putting all these weird angle shots and all this English. I go, how do you do it? And he said, I've been doing it my whole life. And I think the man just has such a mastery manipulating the ball. And by the way, he did it over Jokic, who knows a thing or two about
It was
throwing
the
in
only way
ridiculous
he
shots.
could get the shot off. There was nothing else he could do.
Yeah. Anyway.
And by the way, that just real quick, because it's going to get lost in the shot. The Mavericks had a horrific fourth quarter. Denver just marched them down, did all the typical Denver stuff. And then Denver made 5 mistakes in the last 40 seconds of the game. Didn't get a 2-for-1. Left Luka completely wide open for the game-tying 3. Jamal Murray got an open shot, but took it too early and missed. Like, they did a whole bunch of stuff wrong to lose that game in regulation after the Mavs nearly let it get away. But for Dallas, we've talked a lot about that playing situation. We're going to talk about the Pelicans, I think, in a bit. That could prove to be a pretty massive win for Dallas down the stretch here to steal that one.
Yeah, because Luka
didn't look like they were going to win.
Right, Luka coming back from a hamstring issue, even though they were playing at home, you had to figure that was going to be a loss.
Yeah,
and they stole it. And by the way, had that shot not gone in and the game gone to overtime, you're betting on Denver even on the road, even as bad as they were in the last
Dallas could completely melted down the stretch of the game, but Luka and Kyrie, they can do special stuff.
So this is not something I thought I would be saying at this point, but the Pelicans, Mr. Lopez, I believe, is still a property owner in the state of Louisiana. Is that accurate?
That is an accurate statement.
All right.
He might have moved to Texas like our guy, but he ain't a Texan.
Yeah, you said the other Texan on the podcast earlier, and I'm like, well, like McMahon's the first Texan. Like, who's the other Texan? Like, I don't know who you're talking about.
He's wearing.
Why do you think I brought it back up?
I brought it back up. He's wearing LSU Tiger purple there on that tie.
Listen, he's the Louisiana boy through and through. Andrew Lopez, as anybody who's ever met him knows.
That's right.
That is very true.
Anyway, those boys from Louisiana, with their win over Portland on Saturday, and the Clippers just absolutely continuing. They are now under 500 over their last 15 games, I believe. They lose badly at home. I'm in LA across the street here at Crypto. Just went final as we're recording this to the Hawks, who are very depleted right now. Very surprising defeat. And went almost 10 minutes in the second half of this game without a field goal, which I'm no expert, is not going to win you too many games. As James Harden is dealing with a shoulder injury that has zapped his effectiveness. Their defense has collapsed. At one point was one of the best in the league, has totally collapsed in this stretch. Anyway, they're now 1 game separated in the loss column here with basically a month to go in the season. With the Pelicans, the 4-5, which, for a while we saw the top 4 fighting for positioning, and then there was a moat. That moat is gone because the Pelicans have hit the gas and the Clippers have gone backwards. And as Bontemps was saying before we started the pod, the Pelicans have the tiebreak. They went 3-1, icing it with a victory last week over the Clippers at home. I think it was the second night of a back-to-back for the Clippers, but still, it counts just the same.
Mm-hmm.
And Lopez, the Pelicans, your area of expertise, the Pelicans are playing great. And Zion, I got people in New Orleans telling me that since December, when the in-season tournament happened, Zion Williamson has lost 25 or more pounds and is acting. I mean, his performance has been excellent. He's playing fewer minutes, and I think that helps as well. But I got people telling me he's lost 25 pounds. And I don't mean like, in the past where they say, oh yeah, he's added muscle. And you're like, has he? Right. Like, I got people saying like, he's truly, for the first time, I feel weird even saying it because, counting on Zion's been a losing proposition. You watch the Pelicans, you're around them. You'll see them, I think, soon here. Mm-hmm. What's going on there with Zion and the Pels? We talked about them in the pod last week, but they've even done better since then.
You can see it. I think the weight, if you go back and look at him in the in-season tournament and you look at him now, he looks completely different. And I think being I mean, frankly, I mean, it is what it is. They were embarrassed in Las Vegas. Like that. That's what happened in that game. And on that stage, where Zion was supposed to have it was his first, on the stage moment for them. He'd had games where he was, Christmas Day games and other games where he has been featured, and opening nights where he hasn't been available. And this was his game, and this was supposed to be it. And
that was him and LeBron. Finally, everybody healthy, big stage.
And it went completely the wrong way. And I think since that moment, and there was a team meeting around that time as well, things have gone on the up and up for him. And he looks like a completely different player. Like you, I've heard a lot of great things from multiple people in New Orleans about the buy-in that he's had, the transformation in his body, everything just right now for him feels and looks different. If you look at him just the last month, I'd say I looks like the best he's been in the NBA since he's come in. Physically, he looks different. He looks completely different on the other end of the floor, where, as I was talking with Zach the other day, that's going to be where teams are going to challenge him in the playoffs. He's going to have to be that much better on that end of the floor, and I think he has been that much better. You've seen it in blocks. He's going after things. He's getting more rebounds. Everything is starting to change, and I think in New Orleans as a team, they are starting to feel something might be happening. And if they're starting to peak, I think, at the right time. And you mentioned the minutes going down. I think part of the reason the minutes have gone down is because when they've started to play bad teams, if you're one of the worst clutch teams in the NBA, which the Pelicans are, the one way to not have more clutch games is to just beat the heck out of teams before that. If you can get up by 20, you're not going to be in a clutch game. So they're starting to, I think, realize, okay, things are going in the right direction. The bench is playing outstanding right now, but it all starts with Z. And I think the weight loss is I mean, you just see it in his face. I mean, he looks completely different.
It's not unusual for players to lose weight during the season,
right,
but not like that.
No. And I think he did it if you look at him in December and just to now, like in a 2-month span, or I guess it's 3 now, but he looks like a new player. He looks like what he probably should have, what they maybe hoped he would have come into the year looking like. Yeah. But he was still rehabbing. He was still coming back. I don't think they were going as hard and pushing him early on just to make sure that everything was going to be right with the knee, the foot, and all the other injuries. You go back to him missing games this year. I don't think he's missed back-to-back games. Sometimes he's sat because, okay, he's the one thing I'm hearing, he's listening to his body more. He's like, okay, maybe I shouldn't push it tonight. They did a couple of back-to-back things, but they weren't playing him and doing some stuff like that. But I mean, he's on pace to play the most games he's played, and everything is going, I think, in the right direction for the Pelicans at the right time.
Well, and look, I thought we obviously talked about this stretch last week, about the stretch they had coming up, and they play that game in Cleveland. Donovan Mitchell comes back. By the way, Donovan Mitchell has not looked great first couple games back. Something to monitor him coming back from that bone bruise in his knee. We'll see what that looks like, but they get obliterated at the 3-point line in that game. They lose, whatever. They had a rough shooting night. The other team made a trillion threes. It happens. But
minus 48 or something in a
they got outscored by something ridiculous. Yeah, that happens in games. It's whatever. It happens. But it started this pretty crucial stretch for them. Wasn't a great start. Then they go home and play the Clippers. Obviously, a pretty important game on Friday. And they come out, they take care of business. And we were talking about before, they got Zion running point in this fascinating lineup with Trey Murphy, Herb Jones, Brandon Ingram, and Larry Nance Jr. I really hope that becomes a lineup that they can close games with in the playoffs and let Zion operate with the ball, because I think that's their best chance to be successful at the highest level. Got a lot of concerns about CJ in the playoffs in certain spots. Obviously, Jonas Valanciunas could be taken advantage of some, particularly on defense. But that grouping, when they're out there, you let Zion cook. You got shooters around him. Larry's a really versatile defensive big and do a lot of stuff, handle the ball a little bit. Like that, the way they're able to close that game out with that group, I like that a lot. And I thought, to your point about the maturation of the whole group, I thought that was a mature performance. And now they've given themselves a chance to have home court in this series, because the Clippers have basically just given up, seems like, being a top 3 seed. And it's going to be, looks like, them in New Orleans in that 4-5, which would be a really fascinating first round series. Because as we also talked about before, they don't have a great Zion Williamson matchup on the Clippers. And they also, I don't think, can really take advantage of some of the issues the Pelicans have defensively like other teams can.
And to that lineup, two things have worked that have made that lineup unlock that. And we'll see how much they use it going forward. One is Herb Jones shooting the ball like he's a top 10 guy in three-point percentage, I think, in the NBA this year. I think he's 43% right now. And that's after a kind of rough-ish start. He has really started to hit everything, and you could see his confidence building on that end, shooting the corner three, shooting from the like above the break. Like everything has changed for him. And the other is Trey Murphy starting to look like the guy that we knew Trey Murphy could be and we have seen Trey Murphy be in the past. Trey Murphy missed the first he missed October and November with a meniscus injury that he suffered in the preseason, like preseason workouts. I think he came back December 1st. His December was like, okay, this is what Trey Murphy is. Had a little bit of knee soreness around Christmas. They sat him for about 3 or 4 games. And then in January and February, he just didn't look like Trey. And I think he was kind of getting in his own head with some shots. And then recently
he's playing for a contract. He's got a contract. You know, I'm sure that was on his mind.
And he
for an extension,
looks,
to be clear.
Yeah, I mean, he came into the NBA at age 22. Very much of a late bloomer. He's been working towards this moment for this contract for his whole life, and it's going to be a 9-figure deal probably. And he gets hurt. I mean, I'm sure that had some effect on him. I don't blame him for that.
Yeah, when he has been on this year. And I think 3 of his highest scoring games have been already in March of their 5-1 in March or whatever they are. When he scores like even 16 points, they're 12-0. I mean, when he is hitting, it just opens up a lot of things. And you start to like, when Trey is hitting, is that what unlocks the Pelicans? Or is when Zion is going, it unlocks Trey, which unlocks the Pelicans? And I think they're still trying to figure that out. And what is unlocking what? But I know what the numbers say, and the numbers say when Trey is hitting, things are going pretty good. And with his confidence back the way it is, and his, the shots that he's hitting, everything is starting to go in the right direction. And that's why that lineup where you have Larry, who can do everything you want as a switchable 5 in these certain defenses, and you put you obviously have Brandon and Z out there with them, with those two guys, everything starts to open up. And then if you have a night where one of them, your CJ needs to come in and boom, like against Portland, CJ goes for 30, or you have a Jose night or a Najee night, and it may not be 1 through 5 is one thing, but maybe 1 through 10, I think, is where especially 6 through 10 is, I think, where the depth of the Pelicans starts to kind of show why they're in this race right now to just compete for.
They do have a harder schedule. They do have a harder schedule
Yes.
than the Clippers coming down. They have I think a long West Coast trip they still have to make. But the fact that this is even on the table is very interesting.
Well, if the Clippers are going to keep losing to teams like the Hawks, it might not matter what the schedule is, because that is as bad a loss as you're going to have, especially at home.
Pels go, I think, at on the road for 4, Brooklyn, Orlando, Miami, Detroit, home for 6, away for 4. That West Coast trip is Phoenix, Portland, Sac, Golden State, and then they finish at home against the Lakers.
To me, on that
last game against
East
the Lakers could be spicy, baby.
Could be very spicy. And it could be an interesting option for the Lakers or for the Pelicans with that draft pick with the Lakers this year too, down the road, because they have the option to either take it this year or next year.
Yep.
To me, on that East Coast swing, Brooklyn, Orlando, Miami, Detroit, Pelicans got to go 3-1 to be in the mix with the schedule they've got coming up. They get 3 of those games, probably not winning both Orlando and Miami. Got to get Brooklyn, got to get Detroit. You split those 2 Florida games. I think that puts you in solid position. Obviously, you get all 4, it'd be great, but
because the homestand
for them.
The homestand is OKC, Milwaukee, Boston, Phoenix, Orlando, finish with San Antonio. But so you need to get the wins where the ones you're supposed to win, which I will say has been a much better go this year for New Orleans than it has been in the past. That has been some of their problem before, where they play up to their competition but play down to their competition. I've seen less and less of that this year.
All right. Well, to be continued, to be watched. When we come back here, we're going to talk about the Knicks as we try to put our jinx on another team. You're watching the Hoop Collective on ESPN2. So we are infamous, especially me, for putting the voodoo on teams we talk about on the pod. And so
Lopez,
Monday night,
Lopez, not only are we infamous on the pod, we meaning Brian, for putting jinxes on teams, we sort of have an idea where we like to put jinxes on teams who are around the Cavs in the standings.
That's
you got
just
the Knicks.
That's just ridiculous.
Knicks now have a couple wins in a row. They're catching back up to the Cavs again. All of a sudden,
absolutely
ridiculous. Let's have a Knicks segment.
You go back to Louisiana and you ask about the curse of Lopes, and you will see that I am very much a jinx as well. I covered a Tulane team. The year I covered Tulane, I think 5 coaches got fired. The AD got replaced. I go to LSU. The day I go to LSU, they lose in the Super Regional, I think, to Coastal Carolina, who ends up winning the College World Series. I showed up to LSU to cover a World Series. They lose all the games I'm there. I am very much. I'm very good with being a jinx. Who thought we'd be
talking about college baseball on this pod, Bontemps?
Only people who cover LSU baseball.
I was going to say, Mr. Louisiana.
Listen,
college baseball.
The SEC. The SEC is what we got here.
Anybody who's covered SEC baseball knows it's a real.
Oh yeah.
Somehow.
I used to cover college and minor league baseball. It's massive.
All right. Anyway, so the Knicks on Monday night are playing the Warriors. The Knicks have won 4 consecutive road games. They are playing some of the best defense we have seen in this era in the NBA, holding team after team to below 80 points. They held the Kings in Sacramento on Saturday night to 91, which, adjusted is like holding another team to like in the 80s.
I would argue is their best defensive performance in recent games, because most of the games they were playing the team, as I was at the games when the teams were scoring under 80, those were not great offensive performances.
Yeah, I think they did it twice to the 76ers, or at least
they did it to the Sixers twice and to Orlando, and Orlando was just horrific on offense in that particular game.
So you may say to yourself, how are we, even though we are seeing slowing, a little bit of a scoring slowdown in the NBA, although there's still, there were still multiple teams that scored 80 in the first half on Sunday. So just hold your horses on declaring, the market changed. But, you may say, well, how are the Knicks doing this? And they're playing basketball from another era, like their coach is known for. They play extremely slow in an era where we see the highest pace since the 60s. They play extremely slow. They have the slowest pace. I think they average like 96 possessions a game. That's
96 per 100. Well, yeah, that's in the. You're right. Sorry, you're right.
96 possessions per game. You can't even give you can't even say 100 possessions.
Yeah, I was looking at the advanced stats, which is where
I know, but I'm just saying
they're all based on 100. That's where you're right. You're right.
Typically 100 possessions is less than a game. It's,
Yes.
The way things are going, we should probably increase the standard from 100 possessions to like 110. But when Jalen Brunson brings the ball up the court, which nobody has brought the ball up the court this year more than Jalen Brunson, going into the game against the Warriors, he's brought the ball up the floor almost 2,700 times. When that happens, they typically take 19 seconds before they take a shot. It's 18 seconds or more, not 7 seconds or less with the Knicks. And so they play very good defense. Obviously, they're an excellent half-court shooting team. Their numbers in the pick and roll are very good, despite being without Mitchell Robinson, who is a possession guy for them, gets offensive rebounds, challenges shots. They're still doing this. Jalen Brunson takes an average of 480 dribbles a game. Nobody dribbles more than him. Nobody holds the ball more than him. Almost nobody gets as many screens as him. They basically play like a 90s team where the point guard brings the ball up and they defend like crazy at the other end. And it also helps that they've had OG Anunoby, who they can use in any matchup that suits them.
Yep.
And has been terrific. He's 15-2. Let's get that jinx in firmly for Monday night. They're 15-2.
To be clear, since they traded for him, he missed several weeks. But when he has played, they're 15-2 in the 17 games he's played, going into the Warriors game.
It is a completely different type of style. Also, they've got a couple of guys who are just performing really well. Dante DiVincenzo had never shot above 33% on threes in his career. He's shooting 40% this year, and he's taking 8 a game.
Well, and by the way, the real thing there is if you go back to when they made the trade, so when they made the OG trade at the start of the year, Dante DiVincenzo is taking 10.5 threes a game and is shooting 37%. He has been a flat out bomber from three over the past 2.5 months. And it's really been a game changer for them because they don't have a ton of shooting across the roster. And with him being a volume deep shooter like that, it's made a massive difference for them next to Jalen Brunson. Was a big part of what allowed them to go on that tear in January before everybody got hurt.
Right. Well, in January, they were destroying. I mean, their point differential in January, they were 14-2 in January, and their point differential was 15. They were crushing.
Yeah,
they're 5-2 so far in March. Their point differential is 8. So still, that's excellent. But they haven't recaptured all of it. But they're obviously playing much more like they were in January when OG was playing well. So, I mean, Bontemps, with Donovan Mitchell probably having to shut it down for a little bit, he admitted after the Cavs lost to the Rockets on Saturday that his knee that he got PRP on is not right. And he's going to have to shut it back down, is likely not going to play in the next game, which I think is in Indiana for the Cavs.
Playing Indiana Monday, yeah.
The Cavs are 2 games ahead in the loss column, and the Knicks have the tie break. So this is another key thing to watch with the Knicks playing well.
Well, I mean, especially as we look forward in the Eastern Conference, everybody is going to want to be on the opposite side of the bracket of Boston. And so that 3-4, I mean, it becomes a pretty vital thing. Now, you might say, with the fact that Orlando is looking at least okay to be in the top 5, you might say, well, you'd like to have Orlando in theory of these options in the first round if you're trying to just win a series. But if you're trying to make the deepest run possible, yes, the Bucks scored 140 and beat the Suns on Sunday without Giannis, but I still
they had one of the hottest 3-point shooting games you're going to see, even in a hot 3-point shooting era.
Yeah, yes, they did. They went 24 for 41 for 3, hit 18 in the first half. So you still would rather play the Bucks than the Celtics in a 7-game series if you have your choice. So that battle is going to be very interesting to watch down the stretch. And by the way, Orlando is at 28 losses. They're only 1 back of the Knicks, 3 back of the Cavs, and they have a very easy schedule down the stretch. So we could end up with Cavs Knicks part 2 in the first round, which I'm sure the Cavs would be thrilled to see also. But and we'll see what happens with Julius Randle. We'll see what happens with Mitchell Robinson. But look, Isaiah Hartenstein has been phenomenal stepping in for Mitchell Robinson. He has been a starting quality center. His free agency this summer will be intriguing to me. I'll be curious if somebody really steps up and overpays beyond what the Knicks can on the early bird raise they can give him to keep him. But he has been fantastic. OG Anunoby has been a perfect fit from the moment he got there. And you even saw it when he came back last week. Everything just sort of slides into place when he's there. No Julius Randle right now, but Andrew's guy, Josh Hart, can slide in at the 3. You have him and OG on the wing. Between the two of them, you can guard basically any player, throw those guys on anybody. You've got Dante DiVincenzo, like we talked about before, bombing away from 3. You've got Isaiah Hartenstein running around, setting screens for people, grabbing offensive rebounds, handling the ball at the elbows. And you've got Jalen Brunson, who has been absolutely fantastic. And the one thing that you didn't mention in all those stats about Jalen is if you go on court, off court with him, when he's on the court, the Knicks have an offensive rating of 120. When he's off the court, the team's offensive rating is 104.
Because he's the only guy who has the ball when they're on the court. I mean,
but he's also shooting 6 or 7 threes a game, shooting 40% from 3, and has been absolutely unbelievable. Yeah, he had over 40 again in that Sacramento game. Had this unbelievable play at the top of the key. I haven't really seen something like it, where he had Keon Ellis on him, I believe, top of the key, and pointed over here to an seemingly to an action. And Keon Ellis looked and he just blew by him like he wasn't even there. And but Keon Ellis was like, wait, what? And by the time he turned around, Jalen was already 5 feet past him. And
Jalen can take advantage of people underestimating him. It's, he had 40 back-to-back 40-point games coming into.
Well, he's just a guy when you watch him, like, look, he was a second-round pick for a reason. The Mavericks could have, as Tim McMahon has talked about many times, could have signed him to an even better deal than the one he's on many times and didn't. He's an easy guy to underestimate because he's not very quick. He's not very big. It's all the stuff everybody's always seen, right? But his mind operates at an incredibly high level, and he's able to manipulate defenders and defenses and schemes in a way few other people are, which is why he's been so successful and why he's the king in New York at the moment. And again, we'll see what happens with Julius. We'll see what happens with Mitchell Robinson. Then get everybody healthy. The Knicks have continually built this thing up, and I hope we get to see him at full power here because it would be fun to see them go into the playoffs with this whole crew and see what they've really got with still a bunch of draft picks and ammunition to go add to this team further in the future.
All right, before we go, Lopez, listen to this stat. Ready for this?
I'm ready.
Domantas Sabonis, Nikola Jokic, Giannis Antetokounmpo, and Joel Embiid join Josh Hart as the only players this season who average a double-double plus 5 assists when they're starters. So Josh has made 23 starts this season. He's averaging 12, 11, and 5 assists. To get that kind of, those guys average more than 12 points, but still, to average a double-double plus 5 assists.
I believe he's had, 4 triple-doubles his last 17 games, Lopez? Your guy?
Yeah, and it's as much as you would
he
like
never
to see
had one in his
team,
career before that, by the way.
Right.
As much as you would like to see the team healthy, I would like to see them not, because I just want to see Josh play 45 minutes a night in the playoffs, not get a break, and keep up averaging. I think it's in this stretch without Julius Randle. I know he had 2 starts early. It was like 13, 11 rebounds, 5.5 assists. He had already been one of the better rebounding guards in the league for a few years, like going back to his time in New Orleans. But yeah, I just want to see him have to play 48 minutes a night. Like just let the Nova boys go out there and then see whatever else you could do behind that.
Well, they probably won't be able to score enough without Julius, but you watch them play with this alignment, and it does bring up the same questions that have really been floating around this team for a couple of years now, which is ultimately, for as good a player as Julius Randle is, if he's one of your core pieces in the playoffs, what is your real ceiling? And they just look like a much different team with Josh out there in that spot, because Josh is not the same kind of player. He's obviously not going to score the same way, but they're, like we talked about before, much more defensively versatile, got a lot more switchability that way. They're not going to have Julius dominating the ball in the same manner. The Knicks have some interesting questions to answer ahead. And, Julius isn't playing. Josh will be playing 45 in the playoffs, I can promise you.
Right. And Josh is absolutely the type of player that coaches love.
Yeah. Well, particularly the coach of the Knicks.
Right. But all coaches love him. I mean, I've talked about the way the Team USA coaches fell in love with him last summer. The Team USA coaches played him too much. And the thing about it is it's easy to fall in love with a guy who works that hard in the NBA at the highest level. You've got to have the most talented players out there. So this is nothing against him, but that is the thing. Julius Randle does stuff that Josh Hart can't with the ball, which is, really important. So I do think there's a lot of diminishing returns there with Josh, but he's obviously been great. And I don't think he should be playing 45 minutes, but I could see Tibbs absolutely doing it if he has to.
Just do it. Do it, Tibbs.
So
you're not going to have to tell him twice. There was a pretty funny one moment of that from the other day when they played the Sixers the second time. They lost the first game. They won the second game by 35. And Josh had played over 40 minutes, I think 5 or 6 games in a row.
I think he did 9 games in a row at one point.
I couldn't remember the exact number. Games. The point was he came out of this game. They were up 35 He came out with 4 minutes to go and he finished with 39 minutes played.
That's right.
It was just under 40. And somebody after the game said, "Hey, Tom, what was Josh saying to you on the bench?" He always has something to say to me, so it just goes in one ear and out the other. And then Tibbs did his laugh. It was a good look into their relationship, I think.
All right, Lopez, you got to get back on the road back to San Antonio. Bontemps,
I'm pretty sure I'm getting kicked out of the Moody Center right now. There are
Okay.
multiple people who have tried to come in this room and kick me out. So
all right, well,
I've overstayed my welcome.
Understood. Thank you, Mr. Lopez. Thank you, Mr. Bontemps. Thank you to Jackson, our producer. Thank you for watching and listening to the Hoop Collective. We'll talk to you later this week.